back to my channel. I'm Tia and I upload 4 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. I do mostly wig related content here, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you have, thank you so much. Today we're doing a very special video. This is a Wigs 101 video, and I have been planning and researching this video for quite some time, so I'm so excited to finally be filming it. Today we are going to be talking about a brief history of wigs. So if you're interested in that, let's get started. My interest in the history of wigs started when I received a few comments on my channel about who can and who cannot wear wigs. And so I thought, well, let me look into the history of wigs so we can really put that idea to rest. And so here's some stuff that I found out. The wig trend started over 200 years ago, and some famous wig wearers were Julius Caesar, Charles II, Cleopatra. In ancient Egypt, with Cleopatra, wigs were worn because a lot of their hair was cut short or even shaved off due to the heat, and also they wanted to avoid head lice. So wigs were worn as a status symbol for both men and women, and for the Egyptian culture, wearing wigs was a sex symbol, and it made you more alluring if you wore one. One pretty famous wig wearer was Queen Elizabeth I. She had over 150 wigs. There are several reasons why she wore the wigs. Partially, she wore them because she wanted to appear youthful. She was the queen that never married and never had children, so she always wanted to appear sort of youthful. She also wanted to cover her graying hair, and then because she wore wigs quite a bit, and obviously they're not like the wigs they are now, she did end up losing a lot of hair and having some issues with her scalp, so then she wore the wigs to cover that up. King Louis XIV really made wigs popular, especially among men. He wore wigs starting at 17 because he had a receding hairline and he didn't want anyone to know that. By 30, he had over 40 wig makers, and he sort of started the trend in 1655. So wigs were not always worn for an accessory for fashion. Wigs were often worn because of effects of syphilis, because of balding, plague, and sometimes they were worn because of lice. If there's a lice outbreak, a lot of times they would just shave the hair off, and then wigs would be worn for that reason. In general, wigs were a way to hide telltale signs of illness. So the first wigs were going to be made from horse hair, yak hair, goat hair. Some wigs are still made from those hair types. Outside of Cleopatra, wigs were most popular among men actually until Marie Antoinette. She was known as the queen of fashion of her day. She actually had these over-the-top wigs that had birds in them, and just I absolutely love them. She kind of gives me the Lady Gaga of her time, just ridiculous headpieces. Her wigs were super elaborate, and so her fashion by the 1700s, the wigs were all the rage. The bigger the better, the more elaborate, they just loved them. As before, wigs were a sign of telltale illness. Once Marie Antoinette came on the scene, they were really more only worn by noblemen, wealthy women. They were a sign of wealth. Because of that, and I don't know if you are familiar with the history of Marie Antoinette, that's something you should look into if you don't know. But once the French Revolution happened, wigs fell out of favor because they were seen as symbols of the wealthy, of the noblemen, and people not feeling them at that time. A lot of things that would symbolize wealth were people just weren't having it during the French Revolution, so wigs were out again. One of the techniques that we use currently for wigs is to use either baby powder or dry shampoo. And some of the first wigs, they were not washed properly, so they were powdered with starch and lavender for some of the same reasons we do them. Obviously they were masking odor, but they were really dirty. We hopefully now wash our wigs, but the use of powder and lavender scents and anything to make it smell better is definitely not a new technique. In the 1700s, wigs were adopted by certain professions. Bricklayers wore them as part of their official uniform. Politician, judges. You can still see that judges wear wigs part of their official uniform in the British legal system. And even at that time, the most desirable wigs were made from human hair. Jump overseas to America. Wigs caught on as a symbol of wealth and status. Some wealthy Southerners would even provide wigs for their slaves that would be serving people in the home, just to show off like how wealthy they were. Most of our founding fathers were wig wearers, with the exception of George Washington. He did powder his hair to like make it smell better, but the pictures that you see with his hair in the little ponytail, that was his natural hair. The only other person was Ben Franklin. He didn't powder his hair or wear wigs. Like, he wasn't having any of it. Wigs again lost favor in America during the Revolutionary War. War often does change the tide of a lot of things. Fashion is one of them. So that is my brief history of wigs. There's much more that I could go into on this topic, but I just wanted to give a little brief history so we could put to rest who can and cannot wear wigs and where it came from and what happened. So I wanted to do this video for that reason. If you want to learn more about the history of wigs, I can certainly do that. If you have any questions, put them down below. If you have any thoughts, also put them down below. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!